Hi, we're very fortunate today to be interviewing Dr. Peter's son. He is the Associate Dean of the University of Waikato Management School. Peter, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell me about your position at the School of Management. What do you do?
Yeah, so as the Associate Dean Enterprise, I'm responsible for all executive education. So that involves the MBA, the postgraduate diploma programs, and as well as corporate engagement. So we do things like customized leadership development for companies and corporates. So we work mainly with working executives, not undergraduate students. So that's what I'm responsible for.
And where are you originally from?
Oh well, I have an interesting history. My parents are from Shantung in China, and during the Cultural Revolution they moved across to Sri Lanka. It was my father who first moved. So I was actually born in Sri Lanka, although my parents are from China.
Right, understood. And when did you come to New Zealand?
Well, I came in 2003 December, so I've been here now for, I would say, just about 10 years.
Right, so did you come to study? You came to take up this position at the University of Waikato, or?
No, not exactly. After spending about 17 years in the industry, my wife and I and our family, we thought that we would change our career. And the reason is because I had always had this desire to get back into academia, to give back what I have learned and experienced. So that's what brought me to New Zealand, into the Waikato Management School, initially to complete my PhD.
Right.
And after doing that, I was absorbed into the Waikato Management School.
Oh, fantastic. So you're one of these wonderful international students who came and you stayed. So tell me, the fact that you weren't born here, what contribution does that make to your role now as Associate Dean of the School of Management?
Yeah, I am one of those who are not, I would say, the ordinary academic. So which means that I come into academia with 17 to 18 years of senior management experience in the workplace. So what I brought into the school, which I would say is not common for many academics, is to bring that management experience back into the academia. So that was my contribution, and because of that I was given this position as Associate Dean Enterprise. But also more importantly, I think coming from a different cultural background, where industry is very different, both the pace and the scale of the industry is very different, where you probably work in an environment where the scale is much bigger, much larger than in New Zealand. I was able to bring those experience into the organization, into the management school. And I find that when you talk to executives in their leadership development and talking about strategy and international markets and internationalization, these things are very useful because many of them are new to these types of experiences. So that's experience. That's the I think the benefit that I brought into New Zealand and into the Waikato Management School.
And do you find the Asian experience particularly useful? You say that the pace, the scale is different. Explain what you mean.
Well, if I say scale, I would say if I take any business in New Zealand or any experience I've had in New Zealand, I could easily multiply that by about 20 times, 20 to 30 times the scale that I was used to in Asia. So the businesses that I have been dealing with, they would not call themselves large businesses, but they would call themselves medium to large, and that's anything over 2,000 to 3,000 employees.
Right.
Whereas in New Zealand, a small and medium enterprise is anything between 5 to 20. So you see the scale is very different. So when it comes to such a scale, the way of management, the way of operating is very, very different. So that was one thing that was quite different between New Zealand and in Asia. The other experience in Asia I found was because we have access to bigger markets, you begin to operate in different, I would say, aspects of the value chain. So you are not only manufacturers, but you deal with manufacturers and also all the intermediaries in between, right up to the consumer. So you go up the value chain.
Right.
Whereas here in New Zealand, because we're so distant from the market,
yes,
you don't get to see that, especially in the international global environment. So those are the differences.
What about pace?
Pace is, of course, very different.
Yeah.
If you go to Asia and being a country that is, they call themselves developing nations, so developing countries, the focus is on making the maximum out of the resources that you that you have. So the concept of work-life balance is, I would say, not as common that you find here in New Zealand compared to Asia. So you tend to work really hard. And also in Asia, because you're operating in different markets, you get, for example, the US market starts around evening in Asian times, and then you begin to call them, and then when you come back again, then the European market starts. So you're operating virtually around the clock. Right. So the pace in that sense is very, very different.
So do you think New Zealand businesses understand the real differences in working with Asian cultures in the business sense?
Increasingly so, but I would say still there is some way to go for them to really understand the mindset of how Asians operate.
So how do you think New Zealand Asian leaders can help that, Peter?
I would say in different ways. Now, taking a step back from your question, if I look at New Zealand, what I found New Zealand was good at, which I think is widely acknowledged here, is creativity and innovation. I mean, they're quite good at that, right? And one of the things that I think Asians could contribute, and I've seen that here because I was able to do to some extent to help in that process, is to bring in diversity. Right? So which means diversity of perspectives, diversity of ideas. So when they talk about marketplace, when they talk about products and services that are of value to the customers, you bring a very different perspective. So you enhance that whole creative process. And I found that I was able to contribute quite significantly when I was here. So that's number one. I think also more importantly, number two, and I'll give an example of that, is that I think as Asian leaders, we can make connections for New Zealand businesses. I'll give an example of my daughter, right? Now, she is doing or hoping to do very soon a bachelor's in fashion design. But she's also involved in fashion business. That's what she likes to be involved in. So I have been quickly able to connect her with base of manufacturers in India and Sri Lanka, right? Because I worked in that region. And also working in that region and knowing the retailers, I also know that the front end people in the US and in the UK markets. So I'm able to facilitate her process into or her movement into that fashion design business. So in that sense, coming from Asia, you're able to make that connection, especially for New Zealand businesses. Because being a country so far away from most markets that are so geographically dispersed, that's something that you can bring or you can facilitate and help New Zealand economy here.
So in terms of the contribution that you want to make to New Zealand Inc., given your line of work,
yes,
what is your vision for that, Peter?
First, as I said, to be able to make connections for New Zealand businesses. And I was able to do that in many instances for quite a lot of executives who come into our leadership programs. So that's number one. But more importantly, I would also, that's a contribution that I'm trying to make here, is to see how we can upskill the leadership potential of people within New Zealand, starting in the Waikato region. And why I say that is because I'm able to bring my experience from Asia and from those markets about leadership and leadership development into this context. So to that end, we have just started or just initiated a Center for Leadership in the Waikato Management School. We were able to get $1 million funding for that. And the vision first is to be able to enhance the leadership potential within the Waikato region, and then hopefully from then to the wider New Zealand context. So that's my vision. Now, when I say leadership potential, I'm not only talking about the behavioral aspects, because leaders do also need to have social connections and social connectivity, and that's an area that I can facilitate, especially with businesses in the Asian region.
And if you was to say one thing to New Zealand business to increase their success in Asia, what would that be?
Visit them and get to know them.
Yeah, right.
And the reason why I say that is it's so surprising, because I deal with the MBA and executive MBA program in the Waikato Management School. We do take about 35-40 leaders across to Asia every year,
right,
to experience the market there. and probably around 60 to 70% have never ever seen Asia.
Really?
Yes.
Goodness.
And when they go there, they are blown away by what they see and the scale that they see. So I think the first thing is that they should visit and get to know people. I think within New Zealand who are of Asian origin.
That's right.
Develop connection with them, and then ensure that you go along with them and experience those markets. Because I do find quite a lot of Kiwis are scared when you talk about Asia. That's because they're scared of intellectual property and what will happen to it. They're scared that they'll get burned in the Asian market, which you can if you're not careful. They're scared that you'll lose money, which is also true, because one of the problems in New Zealand is you like to do something very small in Asia, and start small and hopefully it grows. But in Asia, it doesn't happen that way.
No.
You just can't start something very small. You need to start something quite substantial and big. So that mindset they need to understand. The Western mindset is often, when you speak of Western mindset, they always speak of 2-3 year payback period. And I have found in certain Asian countries and contexts, they don't work and operate in that same context of 2 to 3 years. So it's about relationship, building a 5, 6, 7 years, business relationship, and then growing in the longer term. So that also has to change. So there are lots of things I think New Zealanders need to understand about Asia.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much, Peter. I think that's been very insightful for business, and keep making your contribution to
Thank you very much.
the management school. Thank you.
Thank you.